So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fourth session of the 14th edition of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce Traditional Doing Business in Brazil event. I'm Carolina Albernaz, Director of Business Development Operations at the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce in Toronto, and will be your MC here today. I hope you're taking advantage of the networking features available. You can connect with fellow attendees, speakers, and sponsors, and if you're having any trouble to use the event platform, please let us know. We can help you with any troubleshooting. We had already 3 great sessions discussing Brazilian economic and political outlook, opportunities and challenges for sustainable investments in Brazil. And yesterday we had a very interesting presentation on how to do business in Brazil, move your products, and finance your exports. I think the main message we got was not to do it alone. Have a support system, good partners, and good advice. And as it went up, saving you money and time. For our last panel today, we will hear from Ms. Sara Wilshaw, Deputy Chief Trade Commissioner of Global Affairs Canada, on how the government of Canada can support Canadian SMEs looking to explore international opportunities. Her presentation will follow by a panel compiled by a group of Canadian companies who entered the Brazilian market and is going to share with us why they chose Brazil and their perception of do's and don'ts. Just a few housekeeping rules before we start. The presenters will be available to answer questions after their presentations, so please submit your questions through the Q&A box. If you run out of time to answer questions, we'll make sure that you receive your answers via email. Since we have a packed day today again, without further ado, I'd like to invite Peter Hawkins, Managing Director at MELLOHAWK Logistics and Co-Chair of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, to say a few words and introduce our speakers today. Peter,
Lovely.
with you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Carolina. Grateful to be here. I'm delighted that we're having this final session, not because it's the last session, but because this might be one of the most interesting ones because we're talking about the future. These forums are a real way to understand and collect intelligence from experts, and they would never happen without our sponsors. So their participation sustains our chamber, and their expertise makes these events invaluable. So I want to thank our platinum sponsors, Valley, for their long-standing commitment to the chamber, and MELLOHAWK Logistics, gold sponsor EDC, Export Development Corporation, and the silver sponsors Brookfield, Lundin Mining, and Votorantim Sentimentos. In the 30 years I've been doing business in Brazil, I've looked into this crystal ball many times, and I want to see where we are and where we will go. But when I look in it, I have seen Groundhog Day. There's a real cycle when it comes to opportunities in Brazil. We heard in the end of the 70s, Brazil is the market of the future. Then Brazil is collapsing. Then Brazil is a hot member of BRIC. Then Brazil sinks like a brick. Each cycle has the same mantra: the window of opportunity is closing. But this cycle is very, very interesting. We have a resource-rich country with a sophisticated population which has expectations. If you remove all the very loud clutter, you're left with opportunity. Canadian businesses don't maximize these opportunities, in large part because we think we don't need to. But the answer is we do. We need to diversify. Brazil is waiting, the market is challenging, but the rewards are there. We are very pleased to have His Excellency Ambassador Pedro Borio, Brazilian Ambassador to Canada, with us today. Ambassador Borio has extensive experience in international trade and in building strong trade relationships. And I'm delighted to say that he is a matchmaker. His office is accessible and interested, and in the short time he's been in residence, it has been exciting to see how willing he is to reach out to Canadian companies to show them the potential of Brazil. So, sir, over to you, Ambassador Pedro Borio. And
good afternoon, boa tarde, bonjour à tous. Thank you very much, Peter. It's tough to follow your generous words, a little bit exaggerated perhaps about me.
That's my style. Good luck.
It's a great pleasure to join in this meeting, especially to thank all the participants and the sponsors above all for keeping the flame and moving during this complicated times of pandemic. I believe the most important thing is to keep the dialogue going on, and I'm very glad to see that you're doing it beautifully. It's a pleasure to be with Sara today, that I'm sure will have a very important contribution to these discussions and to the other panel members. So Andrew and I think Evelyn was supposed to join, and Carlos, so I wish all a very good panel. I'll be leaving after my speech for a few minutes, but I hope to rejoin you in the end. And I'll start by something that I always say, and Peter and Carolina must be already tired to hear, is that The only bad question is the one that is not asked. So let me reassure you that we are very, very eager to try to answer your questions about Brazil, about business, about bureaucracies, about new trends, and look together for opportunities and possibilities. Peter mentioned the notion of the windows that many times in the past we have already heard that might be closing. What I believe that right now we have a very special window, and we have a window that is changing very quickly. So I believe the width of the opportunities in Brazil is hard to compare. I mean, whichever sector you look at, you will find something going on, and you find something going on very vitally. And this is a typical phenomenon of the so-called fourth industrial revolution, I believe. It's also spread around the country in a way that I haven't seen in more than 40 years. Like, we have clusters of innovation in many, many different parts of the country, including ones that, especially for a foreigner, I believe would be unexpected, like deep in the Amazon or all over the country. You have young professionals fiddling with innovation, with incorporating new technologies and changing established notions, especially ones about agriculture and agribusiness. Everybody knows that agriculture is a very strong part of Brazil, and you probably have heard talk about, oh, Brazil has reversed to being an agricultural commodities exporter. But the thing is, agriculture these days is not what it used to be. It's a super innovative part of the economy. It's one of the fields where the innovation is being incorporated in the fastest way. And again, when you talk about opportunities, certainly one place where one would look. In our informal conversations with the chamber, I heard the interest that is constantly comes up about privatization and what is going to happen to small and medium business. And so I think it's interesting to say that these are topics that we could not cover completely in one single seminar, and probably not in many seminars. But let me just give a few examples. First, the commitment of this government in Brazil, and also taking up from what was already done before in terms of structuring reforms and all, is clearly in the direction of further privatization and further opening of opportunity in terms of not only privatization, but also concessions or better regulation or clearer framework for either new or increased investments in Brazil. The numbers speak by themselves. If you look at what has been going on, you see significant movement in oil, you see in railways, you see in roads. And the fact is that the economy has not stopped. On the contrary, I think the worst concerns in Brazil were very similar to those in Canada, that the pandemic would provoke a tremendous paralyzing effect. This simply has not happened. And I'm glad to quote the example of this new regulations put in place by the Brazilian Central Bank just a couple of weeks ago about the payment system, the so-called PIX system. Well, in a couple of days, let me stress that, I mean, it's impressive even for me, and I'm a permanent optimist about Brazil, but in a couple of days, about 4 million people joined this new system. I think that sends a very powerful message. First, about the size of what we're talking about. Second, about the vitality of such a new sector like the fintech one. There is a speculation that what we might be witnessing in Brazil is a change from a concentration in a few, maybe a dozen large institutions, to a new field of a few hundred players that will be operating under totally new, highly competitive and at the same time highly accessible rules. So this, I think, is an excellent example. My opinion could be enough to stimulate people at least to look at Brazil. Other fields, let me mention something that I think is highly unexploited, is the the quality of the talent that one can find in Brazil, not to simply recruit to come to Canada. Or I always joke with my Canadian colleagues that I'm not in the business of exporting Brazilians, but we are in the business of exporting talent, meaning you can easily picture possibilities for Brazil being a much stronger place in terms of outsourcing. The cost of hiring a talented engineer in Brazil, or a game developer, or a software mathematician is certainly appealing, and I believe the barrier of the language, which still exists to some extent, and puts us a little behind the countries that have an easier path, like India or other English-speaking countries, is not something that should discourage people to look into the opportunities. Let me also mention some of the constant, more techno-political, let's put it this way, subjects that come up sometimes. It's very common to see criticism about Brazil or Brazil-Canada, or the negotiations going on between Brazil and Europe, or Brazil and Canada. Let me make a personal comment, but I think grounded on a very solid fact that both countries, Canada and Brazil, have extraordinarily transparent political democratic practices, and both countries have very solid institutions. So when we have an instrument like the Mercosur-Brazil agreement under negotiation, the public should not think that the negotiators themselves are not giving a lot of attention to the sustainability aspects, to all the scientific grounded best practices that can be embedded inside the instrument. This is an instrument that is still being developed, and I'm totally confident that not only the negotiators will find adequate formula to cover in a modern and creative way all these kinds of concerns, but also it should be reminded that both countries have their parliamentarian procedures that will look deeply into that, and will certainly have a chance to manifest themselves. So I find it rather childish to see people criticizing an agreement that does not even exist yet. So I believe that we should have confidence in the process, and express concerns or even the suggestions that one might have about how to best deal with these subjects. This also goes for other issues, perhaps a little less contentious, but like taxation or bureaucracy. We were talking, Peter and Caroline and I, about some hurdles that sometimes the entrepreneurs find when they want to set a new business in Brazil, like it was the case of many startups that had to be very creative about, or investors that do not want to be exposed to labor liability just by having an investment in a new company or something like that. So this is a particular example of subjects that are propitious for us to listen to advice or to concerns coming from the private sector, from the entrepreneurs themselves, from the innovators themselves. We are talking about lots of ideas that sometimes are not regulated in Canada or in the US or in Brazil or anywhere. So let us trust that we have a role to develop together, that we can do a lot, and that very frankly, I think we don't find the same kind of width of a relationship going back more than 100 years in terms of political relationship and investments that we find between Brazil and Canada. So key message is we are open for dialogue. We hope to explore all the questions with you with no limits. And this is a particular good kind of environment. This event is very positive for that aim, and I wish you every success. And it's a pleasure to be together with Sara here. I believe she's going to follow her remarks, and I hope to rejoin, as I said, in the end. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for your words, and please count on us to develop. There's just the beginning of our tenure here, and we're looking forward to developing many projects with you in the next 4 years. So thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate your time and look forward to welcoming you back in a couple hours. So now, Peter, with you, I'll pass the microphone back to you so we can introduce our keynote.
Thank you so much. Everybody, we are very lucky and honored to be joined by Deputy Chief Trade Commissioner Sara Wilshaw. Ms. Wilshaw brings deep experience in senior leadership roles, including the NAFTA advocacy, and she was most recently Consul General in Dallas of the South Central United States. Her overseas experience with Global Affairs Canada includes assignments in the embassy in Japan, managing intellectual property issues of the permanent mission of Canada at the World Trade Organization in Geneva, providing leadership on Canada's commercial relations with South Asia as the Minister Commercial at the High Commission of Canada in India. And in Ottawa, she has held progressively senior positions covering East Asia, multilateral trade policy, human resources management, strategic policy, corporate social responsibility, Trade Commissioner service support, and as the Director General of the Office of the Chief Trade Commissioner of Canada. The reason why I bring all that stuff up is she is somebody you have to pay attention to. And I couldn't get over all the tweets in support of your new role. There's a length as long as my arm of all these people saying, oh my God, best person for the job, best person for the job. Well, folks, we get a chance now to listen to the best person for the job talk about it. Her new appointment as Deputy Chief Trade Commissioner at Global Affairs Canada will make great use of her abilities and her extensive global trade knowledge. And we welcome Deputy Chief Trade Commissioner Sara Wilshaw. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. That was a very kind introduction. And also, obrigado, señor embaixador. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Good. I speak Spanish, not Portuguese, but I am thrilled to be here. And a special thank you to the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to this session of the 14th edition of Doing Business in Brazil. It looks like you've had a really great week, and so I'm really, really pleased to be here. Malgré les défis associés à la COVID-19, je suis très heureuse que la technologie nous ait permis de nous rassembler aujourd'hui. As Ambassador Borio said, the relations between Canada and Brazil are long-standing. We opened our first trade office in Brazil in the 19th century, established formal diplomatic relations in 1941, and our trade, investment, and people-to-people ties have grown stronger ever since. As I look forward in my crystal ball, I have absolutely no doubt that we will continue to have many opportunities to strengthen our relationship and our collaboration on key hemispheric and international issues in many economic areas. We have truly entered an unprecedented period in our lifetime due to this pandemic, one which has disrupted and deeply affected our day-to-day lives. COVID-19 has accelerated the existing trend toward a more fragmented global order. And however, I can also say that these circumstances have brought out our real spirit of innovation, of resilience, and of adaptability. And it is in no way that it lessens our interest, Canada's interest, in creating and maintaining bilateral and multilateral relationships that advance economic prosperity for all. Prior to the pandemic, Canada was in the midst of an ambitious trade diversification strategy, and we were already seeing its benefits. In just the last few years, Canada had negotiated agreements with the European Union, with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and of course, we had recently ratified on July 1st of this year, the new Canada-US-Mexico agreement, which was a modernization of the 26-year-old NAFTA. Altogether, these ambitious agreements have added over 1.5 billion consumers to the growing list of places where Canadian businesses can compete and succeed on a more level playing field. However, Canada's trade diversification does not stop there. As the ambassador said, we will continue pursuing trade into other markets, including South America, which is a key priority now and for the future, and Brazil features very prominently in our plans. In 2018, we launched trade negotiations with Mercosur, which includes Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, of course, Brazil, and Canada and Mercosur have a lot to offer each other. We know that our people expect the rules that govern trade to reflect their values and interests, and we are looking to expand opportunities for all people, particularly women, Indigenous, and other underrepresented groups, and small and medium-sized businesses. We are working with all stakeholders, including non-governmental organizations for labor and environment, so that these negotiations set a really high standard. This is about building the future we want to see. While elections last fall and the pandemic this spring have required us to postpone the 8th round of negotiations for the Canada-Mercosur FTA, our negotiators have continued to engage virtually to advance the negotiations wherever possible. That being said, we're ready to intensify our work and see what progress can be made. Our negotiators will be leveraging all of this great technology to expand our virtual engagement in the months to come. In 2019, this is more on the trade side, Canada and Mercosur exchanged $9 billion worth of trade. The lion's share, $7.7 billion, came from trade with Brazil. Canada exported $2.3 billion worth of merchandise goods in 2019 and imported $5.4 billion worth of goods from Brazil. Brazil is truly an economic force. It is the world's 9th largest economy with a strong regional influence in South America and beyond. We know this. We have a long history of working together in areas like defense and security, health, science, tech, and innovation. And this year, we are actually celebrating the 10th anniversary of our Canada-Brazil Science, Technology, and Innovation Agreement. This agreement allows our private sectors to work together to develop joint commercial innovation that brings benefits to both our countries. This is the stuff that truly takes us into the future. In the south of Brazil, MyTax has just signed a new partnership with the Fundação Araucaria, excuse my pronunciation, helping to strengthen Canada-Brazil ties in the next generation of researchers as well. On the international stage, we're also working together to support and strengthen the rules-based multilateral trading system, the World Trade Organization, at its core. And at the G20, we also work together to promote sustainable and inclusive trade policies for all G20 member countries and their citizens to ensure that the benefits of trade are shared by as many as possible. I would also like to recommend the strong contribution of Brazil as a member of the Lima Group on holding Venezuela to account, while at the same time opening its doors and welcoming Venezuelan refugees and helping them to integrate into Brazil's social and economic fabric. More recently, Canada has appreciated counting on Brazil's participation in the Foreign Minister-led Ministerial Coordination Group on COVID-19. This is an area where international collaboration is absolutely critical for us to address this global challenge. Les perspectives sont prometteuses et le renforcement de nos liens commerciaux est la prochaine étape pour en bénéficier. We begin with the principle that trade needs to be comprehensive and needs to build more bridges between more of our peoples. Nos liens en termes d'investissement direct sont aussi une grande importance pour nos deux pays et représentent une part significative et croissante de nos relations commerciales. Brazil's investments into Canada surpassed $15.4 billion in 2019, with some well-known and successful examples, such as Vale's purchase of Inco and Votorantim Cimento's world-class operations in Ontario. Small Brazilian companies, mostly innovative and technology-driven SMEs, have also successfully invested and grown in Canada in recent years so that they could also increase their access to global markets. Aujourd'hui, quelques 500 compagnies canadiennes sont actives au Brésil, dans une variété de secteurs visant, entre autres, les infrastructures, l'énergie, l'eau, l'agriculture et les secteurs extractifs. Ensemble, ces compagnies ont investi 12,2 milliards sur le territoire brésilien en 2019, générant un impact économique important. Each of these companies plays an integral role in bolstering bilateral trade between Canada and Brazil. Building upon our more traditional commercial ties in the mining and oil and gas sectors, we are looking to further expand opportunities for businesses between our two countries in the clean tech, high tech, health, aerospace, telecommunications, and education sectors. There are so many opportunities. When we think of the future, we must think about the young people, and that means education as well. The total number of Brazilians who studied in Canada in 2019, including those pursuing short-term studies, is estimated to be 40,000. This makes Canada the #1 international destination for Brazilian students for the 15th year in a row, and Canadian education associations are very active in Brazil. We have seen several sign MOUs with Brazilian government bodies, and we'd like to see more. We also provide the support and expertise that can propel Canadian businesses to succeed. Funding programs like Can Export continue to assist Canadian exporters and have approved over 100 projects for SMEs interested in the Brazilian market. If you don't know about these programs, please contact one of our trade commissioners. They will sort you out. We have also 34 trade commissioners located all across Brazil. We have folks in Sao Paulo, we have folks in Rio, Brasilia, Recife, Belo Horizonte, and Porto Alegre. And many have helped Canadian companies to establish trade linkages and operations in Brazil. Allow me to share a few examples of the successes of the Trade Commissioner Service in their contribution to both sustainable development and diversity, some of our priorities. In the clean tech sector, Canadian company Brookfield, which owns BRK Ambiente, is the largest private water and sanitation company in Brazil. BRK formed the largest public-private partnership in Brazil to bring imported sanitation services to the Recife metropolitan region in the Northeast, an area of low water and sanitation coverage and high economic vulnerability. In addition to reaching 90% sanitation service coverage by 2037, this project is expected to create over 1,000 jobs, 20% to be destined for women. A component of this project also pursues the objective of integrating refugees and displaced individuals, which is another important social objective that aligns with Canadian priorities and values. In the mining sector, Canadian sustainable practices and solutions for mining are highly regarded, and many have been successful in the Brazilian mining market. Last year, Brazil's National Mining Association, IBRAM, adopted the Mining Association of Canada, which is called MAC for short. MAC has a Towards Sustainable Mining initiative, which is basically a corporate social responsibility program that improves environmental and social practices in the mining industry. And our trade commissioners in Brazil have worked closely also with Women in Mining Canada and IBRAM to support women in mining in Brazil and that movement to increase and strengthen women's roles in the mining sector. In the Brazilian energy sector, my last example, Canadian sustainable solutions have also been successful, including solar power generation by Canadian Solar. Canadian Solar is based in Ontario, has a photovoltaic module factory near Sao Paulo in the city of Sorocaba with an annual production capacity of 380 megawatts. The company also builds and operates solar photovoltaic plants in Brazil. So in addition to the Trade Commissioner Service programs and networks, our partner organizations like Export Development Canada also have extraordinary expertise and services to offer. And EDC, a sponsor of this particular event, has an active presence in Brazil, and they've been active there for 20 years. They have provided insurance to many international buyers, representing billions of dollars in business volume. And of course, partners like the Chamber of Commerce, based both in Canada and Brazil, have been powerful allies in promoting commercial opportunities between our two countries. You have helped boost trade and investment ties, you have helped secure new research and development partnerships, and you have provided this wonderful forum for building those all-important relationships. We are making sure that anyone who's thinking about or should be thinking about Brazil has the capacity they need to explore this market. Canadian companies will also benefit from the recent steps taken by Brazil to facilitate trade, including those regulatory reforms, the easing of those labor restrictions, and improved market access conditions for foreign companies, all very important. Ces mesures concrètes renforcent la confiance des entreprises canadiennes, leur permettant d'accéder aux nouveaux marchés et de saisir des nouvelles occasions. Nous savons que le commerce met en place les conditions qui permettent la création d'emplois, qui est autant important durant ces temps difficiles. After all, trade is about the future. It's about improving the lives of our people by offering more opportunities to turn their hard work and dreams into prosperity for them and their families. Together, we can drive the agenda and be at the forefront of the very real opportunities that come with it. So I will stop there and turn it back to Peter. Thank you so much again for this opportunity. Merci et obrigada.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We really appreciate. Thank you for being here. Thank you for mentioning all these amazing partnerships that have been going on for a while. We're very honored to be part of the Canada-Brazil Joint Committee for Innovation Science Technology. We have among our executive directors, Dr. Ted Hewitt, who is the Canadian chair for the Joint Committee, as well as Marcelo Sarkis, who is the Canadian chair for Clean Tech inside the committee. And we're very, very honored to be involved since the beginning. Please keep counting on us. We'll be keep working on the renewable sector with the mining sectors. These are the strengths that we have. And we look forward to working with you and your team moving forward as well to strengthen even more this relationship between Brazil and Canada. So thank you for accepting our invitation and being here and for the nice words.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you and keep it up.
Yes.
Thank you. Lovely. Merci pour votre discours. J'adore que vous vous concentriez sur nos forces combinées et rappelez à nous à quel point le service de délégués commerçants est vraiment important. Muito obrigado. We are very grateful that you came here, and I love that you talked about the Trade Commissioner Service. It is Canada's secret weapon, and we really need to be reminding everybody that it's the first stop to shop. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for
Lovely.
being here.
Have a great rest of the session.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to our next section, and I am delighted that we are going to be talking to our wonderful panelists. So our first panelist is actually Evelyn Joerg from who is Vice President Portfolio Management at Brookfield Asset Management, and she is also an executive committee member at the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce. At Brookfield, Evelyn knows all about the money. So Brookfield has been investing in Brazil for more than 120 years with significant investments in real estate, renewable power, infrastructure, and private equity. As we will move forward, I would say move over Warren Buffett and ask Evelyn, what's next? So Evelyn, please, over to you. We'd love to hear your comments on and your crystal ball ideas.
Sure. So just a bit of a brief background first. So as Peter mentioned, I'm a VP at Brookfield. I'm in the portfolio management group on the infrastructure side. I actually started in Brazil or at Brookfield in Brazil in 2011. So I was there for 7 years in private equity and in infrastructure, and then came back to Toronto in 2018. As Peter mentioned, Brookfield's been or has had a large presence in Brazil over 120 years, actually started there as a joint venture for the electric tramway in Sao Paulo. So we've been there and continued to invest over that time and have been able to be fairly successful. We continue to look for opportunities and just continue to see kind of where our investments will go. One of the reasons why Brookfield really likes Brazil and I think why other foreign investors also like the region are, it's got a good base of the law. It's democratic. There's a lot of opportunity for growth just based on the demographics of the people, and it's very open to foreign investment. So as we've continued to grow there, we have currently 22 billion of assets under management. We continue to look for opportunities that will help us continue to kind of invest and generate strong returns. I think where we'll look to, I mean, no one has a crystal ball, but what our focus is that, although we have great returns in local currency, just being there for so long, we've had to learn how to weather through the FX. And like all foreign investors, we look at our returns not just in local currency, but also in our I guess local currency outside of the country. And so looking at areas or investments where we can continue to protect those returns as we have kind of a variation in the real, whether it's a period of strengthening or currently right now where we have some softness.
It's funny when you say this. I think after you've been there for 120 years, you have seen the cycles, the ups and the downs,
Yes.
and the ups and the downs, and you've stuck it out. So one thing I think that is terrific here is that we have an actual weathering of all the storms, and Brookfield is still seeing the advantages and still growing and growing and growing. Evelyn, what do you think? Was it a mindset early on, or like, I can understand now why you're there, but
yeah,
in the earlier years, can you tell us why Brookfield stuck it out?
So it's one of those places where I think back then as well, you didn't have that much foreign competition. And because we had been there for so long, we really look at places of where we can have a local presence. So wherever we're operating, whether we're getting into India or China, or we've been in Brazil, we like to have that long-term presence. And so we don't just go in, test out the waters, and if it doesn't work, pack up and go home. We really do our homework, and sometimes we'll look at investments or be in regions and not make an investment for a long time until we really understand the market, and then find the opportunity. And I think it's, to your point, we've seen all the different kind of ups and downs, and it's being patient, and it's making sure that we're there for the long term. We're long-term investors, and making sure that thesis will hold over time. So one interesting example is we've recently invested in data centers. So we have a joint venture with Digital Realty, and it's in Brazil and the rest of South America. And in there we have protection because our revenue contracts are in US dollars. So that's an example of how you can combat some of the FX risk.
Right. And something else, you just talked about data centers, and of course, to the uninformed, sometimes me, is the idea that Brookfield is a real estate company and a real estate management company. But the fact
Right.
is, you guys are in everything. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the projects that you see in the future?
Sure. So of our 22 billion AUM, or assets under management in Brazil, the half of that's in infrastructure. Say a quarter of that's in private equity, which is mainly our wastewater treatment investment. And what I would say is we're always continuing to look at, where the sectors make sense. So for example, for us, data centers is data infrastructure. So it's this new form of infrastructure, and it kind of is like real estate. You're building a building, you're making space and power available for data, and that's an area of huge growth. It's continuing to compound the amount of data that we're generating worldwide with the internet and et cetera. So that's one region. Another region we're looking at is solar. So we started to, or we're making an investment this year on an advanced development project on a solar investment. And the idea there is to do a build out of our solar strategy, and look for partnering with companies who've won the concessions per se, might not have the capital, and we have that construction expertise and capital to be able to execute those projects.
Wow, great. It's exciting, and there's lots of new stuff coming. What I'm going to do is we're going to bring everybody online, and we're going to actually go to the next panelist to have them give a little introduction too before we get to the final discussion, which may just be one question because you guys are also interesting. I want you to all keep on there. So next up, we're going to go to Lundin Mining, which is an exciting company with operations in 5 countries and 11,000 employees. They actively recruit women. They have developed a strategy based on safety and integrity and diversity and inclusion. And some initiatives include a new diversity and inclusion plan adopted in 2019 and a gender diversity plan developed for the corporate head office. As an advocate for responsible mining, their Brazilian property is in Chipata and Goiás state, where they are a major employer. And we are very, very pleased to have Andrew Hastings, who is Senior Vice President and General Counsel for Lundin Mining Corporation, and he is also a BCC sponsor, as is Brookfield. And Andrew, we'd like to hear a little bit about Lundin and bring you into the fold here. Please go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Peter. As mentioned, my name is Andrew Hastings, and I'm the Senior Vice President and the General Counsel at Lundin Mining Corporation. Lundin Mining is a diversified Canadian base metals mining company with operations in 5 countries: Brazil, Chile, Portugal, Sweden, and the United States of America. And we primarily produce copper, zinc, gold, and nickel. Our Lundin Mining's market cap is over 5 billion Canadian dollars and is listed, and we're listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ Stockholm. Our mission at Lundin Mining is to responsibly mine base metals vital to society, creating meaningful value for our stakeholders. And we implement that mission through a strategy to operate, upgrade, and grow a base metals portfolio that provides leading returns to our shareholders throughout the metal cycle. Lundin Mining is led by our President and Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Marie Inkster. She and the executive team are tasked with implementing our company strategy at all our operations and in a manner consistent with our core values, 2 of which you mentioned: safety and respect, but also integrity and excellence. Our operation in Brazil is the Chipata Mine, located in Goiás state, which is approximately 270 kilometers northwest of Brasilia. Lundin Mining acquired Chipata in July 2019, so we're a relative newcomer to Brazil. The Chipata Mine, for those who don't know it, is an open pit copper gold mine producing high quality copper concentrate, which is shipped to international customers. We have approximately 750 employees at the mine and a larger number of contractors. I'd like to focus on a couple of points, particularly those that the Ambassador Borio noted for us. And that's one of the biggest surprises for me, and I think for our company when we came into the asset a year ago, was the depth of talent that exists, particularly mining talent and experience that Brazilians have to offer. And so I'd like to highlight that for those on the call, because it was a really pleasant and welcome and easy way to come into the country. As an example, our workforce does not include a single expatriate, and the entire local leadership team is Brazilian. In addition to that, our Brazilian operation has a bench strength that allowed us recently to promote from within after the then general manager departed. So that's been a real plus for us 1 year into this business. The other thing I really want to highlight, because it's really nice to see, is the positive can-do attitude that Brazilians bring to their work. Using our Chipata Mine as an example again, the transition to the Lundin Mining culture has been warmly welcomed and embraced by our local employees, which has really made it easier to transition and integrate this asset into our portfolio and our company.
You know, Andrew, it's one of the things that really impresses me is the fact that you are embodying something we tell everybody. You got to have the people on the ground. And the fact is, the talent that's there has been fantastic for you. So I'm so excited to see that. I do have a question for you. Have you found promoting women in C-suite roles, or at least at corporate head office, a challenge, or have you found a talented group of women as well? I'm particularly thinking about the 80-page Women in Mining report that came out with help from the BCCC, and I was just wondering if in Lundin, because you have this actual goal, I'm wondering if you're having challenges there.
I would say 2 things. One is that from a leadership perspective, when you look at our company, I think we're a complete leader in this space. Our CEO, my boss, Marie Inkster, obviously is a woman. Our CFO, Jinhee McGee, is also a woman. We've got 2 of the 3 top roles, the third being the Chief Operating Officer, are women. Until very recently, we had a mine manager in Michigan, a woman in a leadership role there, and she recently was brought up to a more senior position, a corporate position in Toronto, as well, to join the leadership team there as well. And so I don't think it's been difficult at all to bring women into leadership roles. And I think what it does is it cascades down a very powerful message when you do that to the workforce, and also as a recruitment tool generally, and to women who are working, young women who are working and trying to get into the mining industry, which has typically been male dominated, that those top roles are available in our company, okay? And hopefully also in other companies, and I think that's starting to spread. What we are finding some degree of difficulty in, Peter, is that in the communities, the level of female participation in the mining workforce is more difficult, and it varies depending on jurisdiction by jurisdiction. But we are making efforts to make it more welcoming and to highlight the availability of positions, good positions, for women to join our workforce locally.
It's so interesting because one of the things I noted about Lundin was not only were you doing the recruiting, but you were also making sure that whatever specific needs are for that part of the workforce were met. And so whether it be separate change rooms or just whatever requirements were needed, that it's not that expensive, it's not that difficult, it's not that complicated, but people aren't doing it, and you are, which is actually very exciting. It's exciting to hear. Now, I'm also curious, because of course we have lots of members here who are SMEs. Do you have opportunities for SMEs, or in mining generally, or at Lundin specifically? Have you seen situations where you've had some partnership with SMEs, even potentially Canadian ones? I know I didn't prep you for this question by any means, but I'm just thinking it's one that I'd like to know, and I think our audience would like to know.
I think we're always looking for opportunities to promote Canadian and Brazilian businesses, and to integrate them into our operations to the extent it makes sense and is mutually beneficial. I know that our supply chain operations are extensive, as all mining companies are. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of contracts every year for consumables and services. And so I think there is an opportunity there. But like I said, it would have to make a mutually beneficial resolution, but we're definitely open to it.
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to go to Carlos next, but I just want to, I'm looking forward to Lundin being there for another 119 years just to catch up to Brookfield. So wonderful. Okay, so don't go away. We're going to come back to you. But in the meantime, I'm going to go to Carlos Garcia. So Carlos Garcia is Vice President of Global Payment Operations at Nanopay. And Carlos has been on the vanguard of digital payments and is now promoting digital money technology, not only clearly moving value from one user to another, but also to help you understand how moving money can make you earn money, all with the help of cryptographic security. And we welcome Carlos. Could you give us a few words about your exciting company?
Thanks, Peter, and thanks for the invite. Well, first, just an overview about Nanopay. Nanopay is it's responsible for a modern payment platform based on blockchain and other new technologies that are available in the market. It's 100% Canadian, so everything was built, actually, R&D is here, right? And the objective of Nanopay is actually, by the end, connect central banks. So we are planning to digitalize money in order to have it not domestic transferring money to payments, but actually also international, right? Brazil and Canada are quite similar in terms of the payments and the financial infrastructure. In Brazil, we have 5 major banks actually dominating 82% of all the business. Canada, it's pretty much the same, right? I think the percentage is 5 or 6 banks for 72%. So everything is it's a monopoly of the banks. Our goal is actually, with all these open movements, all about allowing people to choose what institution they want to go, how to move their money. We provide a platform that actually opens the financial ecosystem, right? Brazil, why Brazil? As Ambassador Borio was talking about PIX. PIX is a brand new faster payment system in Brazil that just started this Monday. And as he said, like in the first day, we had 3.5 million enrollments on the very first day, that's this Monday. Just to have an idea, e-transfer in Canada that has, I think, 20 years, they do on the peak day 2 million transactions a day. So just to see how big and how strong Brazil is in terms of payments. Brazil for a long time was the number one after US, number 2 payments market in the world. So our goal is actually provide this technology to make it easier, and we are actually establishing a presence in Brazil first through a partnership, and our goal is actually open an office down there, right? It's always easy to start the partnership there, you know, to learn and to understand how it works, but we start getting like the domestic partners getting associated with the local associations, like payment associations. We even have access to the central bank there. So I think that's an overview of what Nanopay does, Peter.
I'm curious, with the R&D here, how much of the Canadian environment, I realize there's a lot fewer players, but they have the same problems of geography, the same problems of distance. How were you able to sort of test run it here before you applied it there? And what are some of those challenges?
Well, it's different because compliance requirements are different, and Brazil is one of the most, people say that Brazil is very bureaucratic, but regulations there are pretty tight, right? It's not that they are not unreasonable, but without automation, it's very expensive to actually comply with everything that is required. So what we provide to them is exactly this kind of automation. To do that, we have two issues. That is first, understanding how it works there, how the payments locally works. That is the same problem that I have in any country where actually we go. So it's not something just for Brazil. Each one, they have different compliance requirements. But also the language. The language is really a problem when we actually have, usually when you do partnership is through system integration via API. So most of the times you need the R&D team and the technical guys on the other side to talk. And Portuguese is always a challenge to find someone that actually can speak and understand payments.
Eu acho que sim.
Yeah, acho que sim. Yeah.
So now I'm also curious too with the idea of your clients. You said your clients would be connecting the central banks. Would those be your only clients, or do you have?
No, actually, the end game, the end goal of Nanopay and the CEO, the vision of the CEO is connecting central banks, right? To do that, first we need to connect to the payment system, right? And the way we are doing that, especially with Brazil, is trying to cover one big gap that is exactly those. I think Sara said that we are transacting over $7 billion between Canada and Brazil. How those payments are flowing, right? So the large corporations are fine because they use the banks, right? They are well served for the banks. But how about the small farm that is selling coffee to Starbucks, right? How do they actually receive the money for Starbucks or pay whatever they're buying? So those guys, those small SMBs are very well. They're not well served by the banks because the banks, they just started the major corporations, right? And the idea is to create a platform where they can go there and they can submit a payment, an international payment, without knowing there is an international payment, right? We want to be as easy as do an e-transfer.
Wow.
Get into the other side of the world, right? And we already almost done in Brazil. Like we're finishing. It's going to be launched in a month or so. The first platform to execute this kind of payment.
Oh, that's so exciting. I'm having challenges right now just with the pandemic of people struggling with checks, then don't want to pay wire fees, then they're using Interact, and then they're asking to charge things on top of the credit card fees or something like that.
Yeah.
You're hitting on a genuine problem, which I love because I always say, don't try to sell to another country unless you're providing a solution to a problem.
Exactly.
And yeah, they've got one and you're solving it. Thank you.
So money moving out, in and out for Brazil, it's always a problem. So my idea is, our goal is do both ways, right?
Yeah.
Because we also have Canadian companies trying to pay Brazil. I have the same issue here, right? With a small, medium company. So this SMB, it's always underserved in terms of payments. And I think we have the right technology and partners to actually provide that on a way better service than the banks.
Wonderful. Okay, that's exciting. I'm glad there's no banks who are our sponsors. So okay, I'm good. Thank you so much, Carlos. Stay on with us too, and I'm going to go to our next very, very exciting guest. And so it's Dr. Hisham Omara, who is Vice President of Strategic Growth at Opus One Solutions. He has a PhD in electrical engineering, and Opus One Solutions is a leader in developing an intelligent, connected, and sustainable energy network. They optimize the distribution grid today and plan the grids for tomorrow. Hisham is an advocate for SMEs and open access. And yesterday we had a little conversation, and he listed all the challenges. So I'm looking forward to what he has to say. And we're delighted to have you here today, Hisham. Please tell us a little bit more about your company and about your views and your crystal ball.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Can you guys hear me clearly? Just making sure.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, that's great. So Opus Solutions is a software and services company that's focused on helping distribution companies in the utility sector specifically in that transformation from, you could say, the old way to the new way, how to deal with a lot of the changes in their business models, the uptake of distributed technology like solar, wind, the disruption from electric vehicles, and how that impacts not only their business models, but also their operation and planning. And that we kind of put together a software capability at enterprise level that breaks a lot of data silos that exist within utilities, and as well helps utilities understand that transformation they have to undertake. Of course, each utility varies differently in at which level of transformation it is and how the regulation applies to it. So it is a very hands-on engagement with utilities through this transformation. It's not just about deploying the software, but helping through that kind of capability. And some of the key works we're actually doing is around the idea of flexibility markets, which is very predominant in the European Union, and we're very heavily involved in that space, or what's called transactive energy markets in North America. We're also helping out with the deployment of DERs, the planning for them as well, and the operations at the same time through our capabilities. So our growth has been predominantly initially in, again, North America, Canada. Most Canadian companies make the migration down south to the US. And we've made them recently been actually very successful in the European space, which brings us into what Brazil is actually. We've been working quite a lot with a lot of the big distribution companies in Europe that have arms on the Brazilian side. So Enel, Iberdrola, EDP, and others. And we've been making small forays into the Brazilian market. It has slowed down a bit because of COVID, recognizing that is a challenge. But we've made some forays into the Brazilian market. We're waiting to hear back on a couple of opportunities that we're, fingers crossed, successful in. And we're looking at helping that market in Brazil, and specifically Brazil, because similar to our approach in Europe, where the UK was our kind of beachhead, we envision Brazil to be our beachhead into Latin America, being the largest market over there. There's a lot of challenges Brazil have. They're not necessarily only unique to it, but I think solving them in the Brazilian market will help us really fundamentally expand. On the area of challenges in working with Brazil, we can speak to a lot. I think some of the changes that are happening from a regulatory point of view and privatization, while are very welcome, I think are somewhat geared towards larger companies. So as SMEs, we're somewhat of a secondary thought in that space. So I think some focus need to be placed on this. The other parts I would say that would be welcoming is just the availability of information. It is difficult sometimes to, especially with a language barrier, to kind of break down the silos of where all the data is and all the information and put together a cohesive picture of what's the market like. And I'm an expert in the sector, so imagine others who are not necessarily as endowed in understanding the market and the sector itself, just breaking down the silos, bringing a comprehensive picture and communicating that back to a company and others in the industry here in Canada to help them get energized to participate in the Brazilian market. And I think the last part also I would say is, while there is collaboration between both governments on helping co-branding of kind of projects, I think a lot of it's driven towards R&D. And while that is suitable and to a certain degree, it does not really help the idea of landing and expanding. It kind of limits the kind of opportunity to work with different businesses in the Brazilian market because the very strict needs around R&D. And while I appreciate the desire to develop IP, at the same time, part of business development is also ensuring that you actually are able to do business in the market. And if you don't facilitate, if that's not being facilitated, it is somewhat limiting, I would say.
Don't you think, though, that breaking down the silos is actually a profit center? I think you've actually got a great idea there. In
terms of the data, well, it is absolutely. I think for every utility in every sector, specifically in the utility sector, faces an issue of breaking up silos. Its system was never built to initially have that kind of level of interaction, and now it's being forced to break it up. So there's, again, where there's a challenge, there's an opportunity, and that exists. And I think there's a great opportunity for us to kind of break that. And that's the work we've been doing in North America and Europe. And we're trying to bring that to the Brazilian market.
And I also am curious to, you talked about Brazil being such a huge part of the South American market, but one thing is Brazil is many countries, you know, and you can't paint the whole thing with one
Of
paintbrush.
course.
I'm wondering if, can you tell me a little bit about the challenges you have to try to reach the different regions? And if you're talking about the South, or you're talking about the Northeast, or you're talking about the Amazon?
I think for a company like ours, the challenge is that we have limited staff and limited capital when it comes to market expansion. So I think some of our focus is strategic around who we can grow with. So as I mentioned before, we're kind of trying to work with the big 5 utilities globally, Enel, Iberdrola, EDP, because if you work with one of the subsidiaries, it allows you to expand those other geographies. So I think from our end, what we try to do is be strategic around the major cities, because it's easier for us to service those customers being in the Canadian market. So talking about Rio, Sao Paulo, things of that sort. So we're actually trying to be nimble enough that we're dealing with specific regions initially to kind of get that anchor in Brazil, recognizing there is diversity in Brazil and not ignoring that. But I think it goes back to the initial point I was kind of trying to understand is, as somebody coming into the market in a small company, the access to that information is extremely critical to allow us to understand that nuance. And even things like understanding taxation was it a challenge when putting an RFP together, because we had to include taxes, and I could not. It was a difficult task to figure out, okay, what tax is included in this. And again, I'm not a tax expert. I'm not necessarily speaking Portuguese either, so that presented kind of a double challenge in that sense.
We had a Portuguese law firm give a tax workshop yesterday, just to let you know. And FCR
I'll
law.
listen in next time.
Yeah, I'll do better than that. I'll introduce you.
Perfect. Thank you.
One thing that I am curious about too, and just correct me if I'm wrong, you're also doing energy storage, right? Is that?
No, we don't necessarily do storage ourselves, but we do support in the planning and the operation of storage.
Yes, because that seems to be a very hot topic too, especially regionally. It's because there are just some places that don't have a grid of any kind, and or if they do, it's not very consistent. And so energy.
One of the things we do very effectively, sorry to interrupt you, is that we do a lot of work on helping smaller utilities.
Small utilities, and I think we've lost rats, but that's okay. We're going to go back into kind of a larger question. Andrew, can I want to come to you now, Andrew, because I wanted to ask a question about in working in a mine. Of course, power is something that's very necessary and hard to get. How do you find those challenges? Did the asset in Goiás already have that infrastructure set up, or is that something you guys had to build?
Yeah, we do have a private line that runs approximately, I think, just over 80 kilometers that's connected to the grid. So we didn't have any issue there. It was a pre-existing infrastructure. We bought the mine; it had been running for over a decade, and so that was not an issue for us.
Do you see opportunities for SMEs or for companies? Like, I realize you buy services and buy logistics and buy things all the time, but I'm wondering if there are other opportunities for Canadian companies who may be in the mining sphere but are not miners. Are there anything that you have looked at there, or is this primarily provided in Brazil, that you get the people, they have the contacts, they're able to source the products?
I think any improvement that enhances our business, makes it more efficient, we're willing to look at, regardless of whether it's in a haul truck or in data management or data analytics. And all of those factors can make each of those stages of the mine cycle, and whether it's managing ore hardness and trying to figure that out, or ore sorting and analytics of our machinery, all the way up to some of the activities in the corporate office in terms of managing information flows and communicating to the markets and other things like that. Anything that will make us more efficient and improve our business, we definitely would be open to hearing from people, and opportunities would exist there. It's hard to pinpoint exactly one right now, but there is an openness and there's a willingness to change in the mining space generally, and move forward out of the last century.
What's interesting is in my industry, because we move whatever needs to be moved, what I've been seeing is quite remarkable, like the number of drones that are purchased for mines. It's something I had no idea about, and we've been moving a lot of that kind of stuff to Brazil and to Peru and Chile, and it's been interesting to see a tiny drone that can measure the wear and tear of a conveyor belt, and it's just been fascinating to watch how things that you never thought were actual businesses are businesses. You know, leaky feeder cable. I ship that every week, everywhere. It's just something I never even heard of. So it is kind of exciting. Andrew, I have one last question for you, and that is, what is the future for Lundin? Are you looking at other properties? Are you looking for, do you have a prediction of what is going to happen for you in Brazil?
Yeah, thanks. You know, I have to mention again that we've only owned this asset for a little over a year. So I think for us at this stage, it's premature to answer. What I can tell you though is that you know, Lundin Mining's approach in Brazil for the near term will continue to be to focus on the asset we've acquired, understand it better, and look for opportunities to grow its potential, so that we can create a long-term foreign investment success story for not only Brazil and for our company, but also for Canada-Brazil relations.
Great. Okay. So stay on, because I'm going to ask one group question later on, but I want to go to Evelyn. Evelyn, I have a big question for you. Is Brookfield getting into mining?
So Brookfield's had a long history of mining in the past, but you know, can't really comment now to say. I mean, we're always looking for new opportunities, and if it makes sense, you know, we consider it, but we'll see where that goes.
And so what would be, and you don't necessarily have to talk on behalf of Brookfield, but just talk on just as with your knowledge, what would be the industry sectors that you think would be hot? And I'm going to say, give me two large ones and two small ones, like two ones for SMEs. Can you give me some take on that?
So I think you know, hot sectors, so on the large scale, would be any renewable energy. So especially in Brazil, just where geographically the access to sun, to wind, hydro, you know, they've done a really good job of being able to have this clean energy platform. So continuing to look at opportunities there. And as technology evolves and, you know, we've seen the price for solar come down, you know, continue to look at that. On the small side, or small scale, I would say probably more along the lines of technology, and even just in light of what we've seen with, you know, COVID and working from home and virtual school, there could be a lot of opportunity, both, you know, applications or software to kind of the cloud, or, you know, just data, broadband, those types of things.
Gotcha. It's interesting you didn't say cannabis. So, because I've been to 3 different forums on cannabis, and man, everybody thinks it's the new unicorn. I don't know.
Right.
I'm not sold on it, that's for sure. All right, thank you. And Carlos, Carlos, I'm curious too, if you were to identify a client who could really see some growth with your company, can you, like, I'm curious to see who that might be. Like, is there, I realize it's the transfer of payments, but is this really a retailer thing that could help, or is this really for bigger clients? Even, I know you talked about the farmer getting paid from Starbucks, but you're still talking much larger payments than retail payments.
Well, actually, that's exactly the issue, right? Well, the cost of the payments it's most likely reconciliation, right? Be sure that first is the timing that takes, then reconcile to be sure that you receive that payment. It's not only for small, medium business. I will use one of what Sara was talking about, the students, right? How can actually I pay my university in Canada from Brazil? It's something that today is cumbersome. Like they need to send wires or SWIFT, and actually you don't have the match of the invoice from the school to the payment that the student is sending, right? So the school needs to check if the payment comes either credit card that is really expensive, or a SWIFT transaction, or wire, whatever it is. So we are planning to actually, the student goes there, do the onboarding, and send the payment a local TED, right? The payment that's used in Brazil, or boleto, the weird payment that we have there. And actually, the money is going to show up to the university here on their RBC, TD, whatever account they have here, right? So that's the eliminating the friction of the payment. Can be a $5 payment or a $2 million payment, right? But we want us to be the same, as easy as this, right? Of course, compliance information will vary according to what payment you're sending. And the system is actually intelligent enough to understand what is the kind of payment you're sending and what kind of information I need from you to actually execute that payment.
Yes, and currency and the currency rates and all that kind of stuff are to your advantage right now, right?
Yes, currency we try to get the best currency as possible. Like if you eliminate the friction of the payment and the exposure of the payment, because this delay of payment it needs to be covered by credit letters and right. So there is a cost of this delay that it's added to the FX rate. So it's everything to cover the cost because of all the inefficiencies. So if you're more efficient, you can reduce those costs of the payment and you can provide a better effect. So by nature, our effect is going to be the best than cards, than regular SWIFT and other payments, because we can be cheaper, right?
Right. I want you to hang on for a second because I'm going to go to everybody and ask my last question. Hisham, I'm hoping you're still working. Let's see if he's coming on. And here he is. Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Hisham, I have a question for you too. If you were to make a prediction about what is going to happen in 2021, and it is we have COVID, we have struggles, but you're relatively new in the marketplace. What do you think is going to happen? What does your organization think is going to happen with Brazil and with the Canada-Brazil relationship? Can you give me some comments there?
No, I think it's going to be in the beginning of 2021. I think there'll be a bit of a more reassessment to see where economy is as it pertains to COVID. But I think towards the latter half, there'll be more openness and I think drives based on government stimulus specifically to kind of facilitate some of the growth that's necessary to take the economies out of where they are. So I think there will be a growth pattern that we're going to see in a lot more RFPs and a lot more business because we were holding off in the first half towards the latter half. So I think we're being patient. We're still kind of engaging the market. I don't think we're pausing any of our engagements in any capacity. We recognize that our sector already has a slow selling cycle as is. So adding an extra 3 months to it is not to our detriment. It's just we have to be more patient and more engaged and be ready basically to act as soon as the market is basically ready for it.
Which is so interesting because that's an upbeat talk, if you ask me. That is, it's going to be slow and then pick up.
Well, modernization of the at least for our end, the energy sector, utility sector is going to happen. Infrastructure is going to get old.
No matter what.
It's have to be replaced. You need to connect more communities if you want to drive economic growth, especially in areas of Brazil that are remotely connected, that need more connectivity. Push for digitalization as well and modernization. That's not going to stop. So it's just a matter of when, not if, in our opinion.
Right. And if you were looking for a partner right now, how would you describe that partner? How would in Brazil, how would you describe the partner that you need to connect with?
I think our ultimate partner is the utilities themselves. So the end customer is our ultimate partner. But I think if you look outside of that, we're looking for partners who potentially can help us deploy and engage with the customers. I think a language barrier, as everybody kind of alluded to, is there. Ignoring it is kind of burying your head in the sand. So having somebody who understands the linguistic nuances, the cultural nuances is very important in conducting business, but also having people on the ground. And I think one of the initial deals we lost it because of that, because the client felt that we didn't have enough local presence in that space. So I think having local presence and support is extremely imperative for us to be successful.
It's because you're hitting on a whole bunch of bells there, because Andrew just talked about the great unsung value of Brazil having trained professionals, having a huge high caliber of talent. I always talk about the fact that you have to have somebody in Brazil in place who knows the local market. But I also talk about the fact that Brazilians like to complain locally. They don't want to call somebody at a 1-800 line to reach Canada. They want to call somebody in São Paulo or somebody in Recife or somebody local who they can complain to. I think that's something that they find very, very necessary. But also, Brazil has got a history of the bad boyfriend syndrome, where the Canadians come, they're great talkers, they're great looking, they make things exciting, they make things fun, and then they don't follow up and they don't phone. And so Brazil is once bitten, twice shy. I can string out the cliches, obviously, and they're really concerned about that. So what I think is so interesting in your candor is that you have said, we lost it because we didn't have a player on the ground, and that in fact is so key, because you need to have the player. Do you have the player now?
No, we're still trying to identify the right partners in place. I think COVID has slowed down a bit of that. People are just assessing where they stand. So we're still in the market to kind of find and identify the right partner. But I think also just on the point that you said, like the idea of the a bit of shyness around external or third parties, being SMEs from another country, there is that, I would say, sense of risk that some companies, especially in the utility sector, that they don't want to take. And we face it in other markets. So Brazil is not unique in that. I think it's all about a matter of finding the right project, demonstrating value, over delivering, which we really strive to do. And that allowed us to grow in other markets. We've been very successful in the UK market specifically because of that. Yeah. And we're going to take the same candor to every other market we engage in.
Wow. You know, it's funny because to me, every word out of your mouth is an opportunity. And I hope our viewers are listening. That's for sure. All right. Lovely. Thank you so much. I want to go to Carlos now, please. Carlos, in your situation, if you were to identify what is an obstacle, can you tell me what the biggest obstacle is you have?
Well, I think in Brazil, and that's an obstacle because actually the government is helping us to, because of our work with the overcame, the association of the brokers and the exchange, is some law of exchange laws in Brazil, they have 100 years. So they're completely outdated, right? So those laws make the international payments, they're extremely painful, right? So it's really hard. Actually, Brazilians are not allowed until last year to have any accounts in US dollars or anything, right? Now some business and some situations, for example, Brazilians live outside, they start having the opportunity to be allowed to have a US dollar account. So the regulation is being more flexible, and we expect even that they're going to allow small remittances or small transfers up to $5,000 without any straight through. So funds in and out from Brazil are going to be easier. I think it's exactly that. It's the regulations there. Modernization requires modernization of the regulations too, right? And we are seeing some movement there. So that's the biggest challenge. In Canada, it's the same. Right, Canada, we have the same scenario in Canada. I'm saying, like, financially speaking, Canada and Brazil, they're quite similar.
You know, it's funny. I have sent lots of money to Brazil, but all the money that I get from Brazil is through wires. But I've used plenty of other options, remittances and wires and things like that. But what we also do is we do reconciliations, because one of the things too is just with the currency exchange and with some of the difficulties, we're all trying to make sure our clients are balanced as well. But I end up talking to my bank every day. I would love to have a smooth process like what you're describing. Would be very nice. Would
That's
be very
what we're working
nice.
to. Yeah.
Exactly. If you could tell me what the biggest positive advantage of doing business in Brazil is, can you give me a comment on that?
There is a lot. Like, I think Brazil has a bunch of good things that Brazil, as you know, they're complainers, and they always believe that whatever is up from outside Brazil is better, and it's not true. We have some things that actually we as Brazilian, because if you didn't notice yet, because of my accent, I'm also Brazilian. So we have, for example, the first QR code payment that happened was in Brazil 30 years ago. Right, so we have the boleto is actually the same concept as the QR code, right? That now everybody's talking about, oh, faster payments and QR code, but we have that 20 years ago. The system, the financial system in Brazil is very advanced. Like, the coverage of cell phone in Brazil is way better than here, and it's growing. Like, they're going to cover from the 5,000 and something cities they have, they are reaching almost 5,000. So, except on the middle of the Amazon, that probably there is nobody there. All the big cities and major cities are going to get pretty good coverage. So everything that is a payment, a mobile payment or a bank or an app, so everything is going to work. And Brazilian, they have 2 phones per capita there, right? So it's 200 million phones they have. So this is going to give plenty of coverage to any kind of service you can provide to these people, right? So it's a lot of opportunities and a lot of things that Brazil has that actually we don't. Oh, another thing, biometry, right? Brazil is the #1 in terms of biometric transaction. You don't need username or passwords to actually go to your bank account and withdraw money. You just need your finger. You don't need you can vote with your finger. So there's no way to have any kind of fraud in theory in the election, because actually you have biometrics. So it's 4 billion transactions every year. Again, another thing that Brazil is #1, but it's not actually well known outside Brazil.
Wow, it's kind of overwhelming when you talk about the coverage. I always remember the cell phones. Remember when they used to have one cell phone to phone out and one cell phone to receive calls?
Exactly.
So a tradition they've carried on. Thanks. Andrew, please, I want you to come up for 1 second too. So I am curious too, if you could name 2 things. I want you to name really what the best thing about this business is for you. And if you can give us a little comment on the suggestion of what the plans are for the future. And I realize I've said it already and you said it was too soon, but I think miners have long range plans. And so you must have some idea of where things are going. And you can also say no comment. I get that all from everybody because I'm too nosy.
So I would just reiterate what circle back to Ambassador Borio's comment about just the quality of the talent and the ability that exists is to me the really pleasant hidden surprise and hidden weapon effectively and benefit that foreign investors I think will find in investing, particularly I can only speak to the mining space, but in the mining space it has been fantastic to see. In terms of the future, our focus is, because we're a large industrial operation, our focus is going to be primarily on keeping our people safe in a COVID environment. And we've done a tremendous job there, remarkable job with our mine leadership and health and safety teams, identifying and implementing measures to protect our workforce and the communities. But we're going to have to pivot in 2021, hopefully once COVID is behind us, to economic resiliency as well, and supporting and working with the communities in which we operate and our workforce to ensure that the good jobs exist, that we can continue to do the good work that we've been there for. And to Evelyn's point, we have to be patient, and we're there for the long term. You're right, we are a long-term business. This is a long-term asset, and what we need to do is we need to lay the groundwork for a sustainable long-term growth strategy. Because that's how we'll be a long-term sustainable partner for the country and for the state.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. Well, Evelyn, I'm curious now. I want to talk to you for 1 second about COVID. How has COVID, and I'm not talking, masks in the office, but I am talking about, which I have, but I am talking about moving forward, and I'm not the next 120 years, but the next year, Brookfield. COVID, is there a plan? Is there ideas? Is there thinking of what the newest industry is going to be? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So specifically, just because of my background in infrastructure, what we've surprisingly found was our businesses have been pretty resilient during COVID. So they're essential services. So we've been able to continue to operate kind of status quo, sometimes with a reduced kind of skeleton team, but everything's been up and running and we haven't really had any major incidences and our operations have continued. So that's been spectacular. And we can continue to believe that going forward, that will be the case. Obviously, I'm not as close to kind of the real estate side of our business, but we've announced programs to work with some of our retail, on the retail side, opportunities and funds to help, distressed retailers and continue to kind of work towards or work to maintain that portfolio. So I think our long-term view is that, on the commercial side, people will return to offices. In some fashion. So some people expect more office space because you'll need more distance between people. Some people expect more work from home. So I think we'll potentially see a balance, but to be determined, right? I think that's a longer term trend that it's going to take a few years to see kind of how that ends up.
And has a commercial enterprise appeared out of the COVID miss anywhere? Have you said, oh my God, Brookfield should be doing blank?
I think we're still kind of trying to figure that out. So no, revolutionary insights as of yet, but time will tell.
Time will tell.
Time
Yeah,
will tell.
we could have called this panel "Time Will Tell."
Yeah. Sorry, the
No,
crystal ball isn't working.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody said, "I don't have a crystal ball." I thought, we need one. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But okay, so I'm going to wrap up with a couple of questions to everybody, and it's going to be the same question so that everybody else gets to think about it and you don't. So
Okay.
what could the Canadian government do to help promote the business sector, either your business or the sector generally, and the Brazil-Canada trade relationship? And solve Mercosur is not the answer. I mean, give me another answer.
I think just continuing to develop the relationships and either letting businesses be able to operate like Carlos's business, having those kind of reducing the red tape on all our sides so that innovation can happen quicker. And then you can have small businesses be able to start up quicker, integrate within the two countries much faster. And then on the global scale, just continue to support the businesses and then the trade missions that are happening, good dialogue between the two countries that enable us to have this great relationship.
Fantastic. Okay. Hisham, can you tell us too, what would you have the Canadian government do? And I want everybody to open their cameras too, please.
So a couple of things, I think. First and foremost is create more events to facilitate that kind of partnership between different players of similar size and helping identifying the opportunities. And the second part also, as I think kind of alluded to earlier, is if stimulus money and funding is put forward, try to gear it towards establishing business, not necessarily only R&D. And a good example of this is there was a project done by the Canadian government and the British government called Power Forward. It's a joint challenge world governments with money together. It wasn't R&D oriented. It was about bringing SMEs into both markets, and they created into a sense of competition. And I think they had in total like 37 submissions for 6 awards. So you can imagine the amount and volume of engagement that just generated alone between the different entities. So I think something in that vein would be really helpful, I think, for SMEs. But like I mentioned, the other part I think I would say is having a central repository for information and even RFPs. This makes it easier for everybody to navigate that process. And that's both for the Canadian government and the Brazilian government at the same time.
Great. Okay. And Carlos, I'm going to ask you the same question. So what can the Canadian government do to help you?
That's an easy one. I think there is a program in Canada that is called Payments Modernization that actually opens the market for fintechs. It's exactly similar what is happening to Brazil, where actually if you're not a bank and you're a financial institution, you can have the same access as a bank. So I could send a payment having the same cost as the banks, right? That Canada has on target for 2018, then 2020, now it's 2024. So it's something that only when in Brazil the government actually said, no, you guys need to do this and fight the banks, that actually happened, right? That here we go, have PICs. So in Canada, we have the very same going on, but keep being postponed. If the government really supports this, like we got to the point where we're applying for a banking license in Canada because this modernization is not happening, right? So if the government actually do this, it's not only us, like you're going to have a lot of different services, cheaper service options, like portability, you can go everywhere you want without have all the pain of not being, as I say, like it's not account holder, but a hostage of a bank, right? So I think that's the major thing for Nanopay about the government of Canada.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And Andrew, I'm going to ask the same question to you. Can the Canadian government do something good for you?
So in the mining space, I think the Canadian government has done a great job for us. I mean, we're, as a country, a natural powerhouse in mining, and Brazil is as well. And so, if we can continue to leverage our mutual strengths, and I think the Canadian government could assist with the exchange of best practices that we might be able to offer as a country and as an industry to integrate into the Brazilian mining industry and mining space. For example, in the space of which they're already progressing quite well in Brazil, which is streamlining the mineral license auction system and land registry, things like that. And then also the other thing we're seeing good green shoots on in Brazil is tax reform, which was discussed yesterday, but it is a complicated area and it creates a burden for foreign investment that is difficult to manage, but it looks like it's moving, that reform is moving in the right direction. We can continue to support those efforts. I think you're going to see a much bigger breakthrough.
Wonderful. I thank you all. I really appreciate that. Ambassador Borio, I believe you are back. And sir, I was wondering if you had a comment that you could share with us on what Brazil, the federal government of Brazil is thinking about all this foreign trade coming your way. Can you give us final closing remarks? And there he is.
Thank you very much, Peter. Good to be back. I could hear part of the debate, and it's very exciting to see so many issues being raised and discussed in such a forward-looking way, I think. Let me mention one thing that I don't think was explored. One field that I find particularly promising, I mean, urgently promising, is that of pharmaceuticals and biochemistry, because very few people realize that Brazil is one of the largest vaccine producers in the world. So everybody's talking about vaccine development, I mean, finding the vaccine, but a lot of people are forgetting that there will be the need to produce billions of doses of vaccines and to produce the equipment also related to dispensing all that. So Brazil is the largest producer of veterinarian vaccines in the planet, just to give you an example. But the facilities are state-of-the-art. Fundação Oswaldo Cruz in Brazil, Fiocruz is among the best in the planet. Instituto Butantan in São Paulo is the best in the planet for antidotes for snake and spider venoms and all, but I mean, they are in this business, they have been there. And Brazil has one of the biggest experiences established in doing massive inoculations also. We have done it. The World Health Organization considered Brazil to be the most successful country in doing massive campaigns like against smallpox and other. So this is the time that all of this is an asset, you know. So it's just to finish in a positive note that we are in the picture to stay. And if I can add one thing also is, it's quite interesting to stimulate people to learn about parts of Brazil that they don't know, because the country is so wide. If you get someone to move out of the conventional envelope, like a fund manager or a mining company or a service company, and go visit somewhere else, there will be surprises. I can guarantee, I can bet there will be surprises. And I think that's the good part. Evelyn was mentioning the real estate side of Brookfield, which we know is very big. Well, you know, in the 50s, Brazil used to have a large number of the best architects in the world. Then this faded a little bit. It's slowly been coming back. I believe there is a tremendous challenge for architects and engineers that they will be forced, or they have already been forced, to think about conventional real estate in terms also almost of a Lego game. Like, we have to have properties or developments that are multifunctional, that I can quickly adapt to something else. Otherwise, I might be stuck with something that will lose desirability. So what do we do with the movie theaters if the movie industry does not come back quickly, to give you an example? And it's an example where foreign capital is big in Brazil. So opportunities are there, and they will be challenging everybody together. And I believe Canada and Brazil can do a lot together. And they can do a lot together in other parts of the world, also, like developing projects in Africa and using like the great job that Canada has done with export insurance and Brazilian engineering, tropical solutions. Let me mention also a couple of other examples. Canada might buy the Gripen fighter plane, right? Well, Brazil has already bought the Gripen, and Brazil will be producing components for the Gripen. So it's good for us if another customer also buys the plane, because it's going to be a larger market, so it's going to be better for maintenance, etc. But that's again, it's a question of an opportunity, and it goes on and on and on and on. So, and that's the good thing about these debates. And thanks a lot.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your comments and for being so candid and so being inspirational, because in fact, every person here was talking about the fact that they're in Brazil to stay, whether they just started or they've been there for the long haul, generations. And it is a marketplace that has tremendous potential and it's worth pursuing despite the challenges. And many of those challenges are coming down, so we're thrilled about that. In the Canadian marketplace, we have to remember that even for our own benefit, for our own Canadian benefit, that trade diversification and that willingness to look beyond the US as our only major buyer is necessary and invaluable. Things have changed in the world. And since they've changed, we should take advantage of the other opportunities that come our way. I want to thank everybody for participating. I'm really grateful. I think it was an insightful chat. And I also want to thank you all for participating in our 14th annual Doing Business in Brazil. The Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce has been around for a long time, and we've seen a lot of stuff long before I came into the picture. But I will tell you that every day I'm surprised and pleased to see that there is a willingness to exchange ideas, exchange money, exchange businesses, and really and truly work for everybody, improving the lot of all of us. So I am so pleased to see you all, and thank you. And back to you, Carolina.
Thank you, Peter, for moderating a great discussion, for all the insights. Thank you to all the panelists for being here today. I would like to ask our audience if there are any questions. I haven't seen anything around, but please do not, as Ambassador says, the bad question is the one that has not been asked. So if there are any questions, please add to the Q&A box and we'll be happy to answer as well. In the meantime, I would like to thank everyone for all the insights. I think this was a great session, starting with the comments from Sara Wilshaw and the remarks from the ambassador and all the great inputs from this panel as well with the moderation of Peter. And I think if we have no questions, Peter, I would like to ask you to go straight to the closing remarks then.
I will. So my closing remarks are actually pretty simple because I more or less gave them. But what I would like to say is this, is we are talking to people right now through the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce who have the knowledge, the ability. I want to commend you all for being so frank and candid and willing to share time and to talk about your business, because we all love our business, but also talk about this relationship. And I am grateful for that. To our audience, like you know, by all means, reach out to her and she can respond to anything you have to offer. And to the ambassador, thank you so much. You said I was exaggerating. I was not. I was not. You didn't make an effort doing that with this kind, and we're grateful for it. And to Ellen and Andrew and Carlos and Hisham, I'm so glad I'm grateful for the comments you shared. And of course, I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Vale. I want to thank MELLOHAWK. I want to thank Lundin Mining, and of course Votorantim and Brookfield. You know, 120 years. My mother is almost 120 years old, and so you're the two old things I know about. And of course EDC. We are very grateful for their efforts, and really and truly, St. Mary's Cement, everybody else, we're really grateful for your session, the final closing session of the Doing Business in Brazil, and thank you all. We're very grateful.
Thank you to the audience. So I just ask you to keep us on social media, keep engaging. We have a lot of discussions still happening. 2020 is far away from ending for us. There's a lot of really interesting discussions. So if you can have comments on Brazil, please let us know. We'll be happy to help. And thanks again for everyone to join us today. We look forward to seeing you all soon. Stay safe, stay healthy, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone. So thank you so much for being here and for joining us through all this last 2 weeks in the 4 sessions that we prepared for you.